The other thing that I like, again, sorry, going on a little tangent, I like when a kid has written his own name on the inside of the book, right? I was thinking about making a video because I've got a lot of books that are like that, where I was going to say, so and so, I have your book. It's just, I like the idea that a kid went to school with his comic book, wanted to share it amongst his friends where they'd done a swap and a trade. But so everyone knew whose book it was, they wrote their name in it and they passed them around. And I like that. There's something special about that time period. This wasn't my book from my childhood, but this was somebody else's. And now it's found a new forever home with me.
Yeah, I've got a few. I'm exactly the same, and I've thought about trying to follow up on a few, name, especially where it's got a name and an address, because
Mm.
I've got a few where it's got, Hillary Baker, 42 Plymouth Street, Cheshire.
Yeah.
So you could, and I've actually been and then looked at where that house is. To see if it's still there, and to check up to see whether that Hillary Baker still lives there 60 years later. So yeah, I have done a bit of that. The most sort of harrowing one of those I had is I bought an annual. It was a Mickey Mouse annual from
Mm.
about 1940 something, so a long time ago. And I opened it up and it had got this child's name in it, and then it had got this name of a children's home underneath it. And I thought, I recognize that name. And I looked it up, and it was one of the ones which was famous for the child abuse that occurred.
Mm.
I thought, oh, I'm not going to follow that any further.
No, I leave that one.
So yeah, I quite like it when I get that, especially if it gets an address on it. So I know I just come from Cardiff or Bristol or somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like people talk about collecting and they talk about wanting to preserve history and keep these books. And the truth of the matter is that for a lot of them, there is a high print run. There's a lot of books out there. So I like mine to be that little bit special and have that little bit of character and personality about them. I've always said that the the collector of passion in me wants an AF-15. I'm a Spider-Man collector. I want an AF-15. However, it's not a rare book, in my opinion. If you can
It's
go
not
on
a rare
eBay,
book. That's
if you can
not a
go on
rare book.
eBay and type in the name of a book and find four or five of them, it's not rare. If I took my collector's of passion hat off and put on my investor's hat, I'd much sooner buy an Incredible Hulk issue one
Yeah, much rarer.
and keep that as an investment. The thing is that I'm not an investor, I'm a collector, and like I say, it's a collection of passion. I have no control over what I like and what I keep and what I buy. It's because I am passionate about it. My emotions get the better of me and I want these things. Now, that's not to say that I'm not willing to give up this stuff. Everything has a price. And as time goes on, if my children or my grandchildren show no interest in this stuff, I will be the one to sell it. And me and my wife will enjoy that money in our retirements, or we will spend it on said kids in the future anyway. So I'm under no illusions about that. However, if a member of my family is interested, I would like it to be inherited and continue, carry on.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I'm closer to that point than you are. Um, and I am selling stuff now that because I hadn't sold anything seriously
Mm.
a year ago. But my room's full, and I've got a complete room full of comics, and I've got them in the attic. And my wife said, we haven't got any more room." So I thought, oh dear, what's going on here? Because I had to decide what is the stuff my personal collection and what is not.
Yes.
I'm happy to sell the not personal collection to create space to get more personal collection stuff. So that was quite a key moment when I sort of sat down and said, which stuff means the most to me and which stuff doesn't mean as much to me.
So I went through a similar thing all at the time of the pandemic, actually. So I started my Spider-Man run, my Spider-Man collection from I actually have from issue 2 all the way through to present day. So everything from the
Everything.
last, everything, all tie-ins, all
Oh,
everything that you can think of. Apart from issue number one and Amazing Fantasy 15, those are the only two that I need. Um, but when I started that collection, I started literally when Stan Lee passed away.
Right.
I had drifted away from comic books at that time. I had a full collection of Walking Dead comics, because my background is in special effects. That
Okay.
was my job.
Yeah.
And so I had them as like reference and a bit of fun. Um, and I basically, when Stan Lee passed away, I kind of got a bit nostalgic. I got a bit sad about the whole thing, going, oh, it feels like everyone, every child, every man has kind of lost a grandfather when Stan Lee passed away. I was like, I'd like to read some of those comics. So again, I went to my parents' loft and I dug out my first appearance of the Lizard and a few others. And I was like, okay, I'm going to read these. And I just fell down that rabbit hole. And I was like, this is what I want to collect now. I'm going to leave everything else aside. I'm going to collect this. And I went to my local comic book shop and there was no Spider-Man books. But there was X-Men, Fantastic Four, Thor, all the others that I remembered from when I was younger. And so
Yeah.
using I have a pretty good memory, not to brag or anything like that. It's not photographic, but I have a pretty good memory. So flicking through these boxes, I plucked out books that I automatically knew were keys. I didn't even know key collector was a thing. And I walked up to the counter and I paid for them all. And then as the Marvel Cinematic Universe progressed, I knew which books to get rid of at what time. Some might call me a flipper, that's fine. But I bought those books to sell them to buy the Spider-Man books that were unavailable to me because they weren't at the store. And so literally within 2.5 years, I've completed my Spider-Man
Well,
collection,
that's pretty
minus
impressive.
those two books.
Yeah, that's pretty
Um,
impressive.
I'm nowhere near getting that issue one. Like for me, getting an issue one completes the collection because then you've got Amazing Spider-Man issue one through to present day. The AF-15 is the cherry on top. Now, I would have been able to have got the issue number one had it not been for the pandemic. The pandemic
Yeah.
wiped us out
Yeah.
as a family. We needed to make these decisions, and I made some videos about this on my YouTube channel where I basically had to let go of those books that would have bought me my ASM one. I had to let go of them earlier than I would have liked to, just so that we could stay afloat and that we could get through the global pandemic. Um, so that's kind of one of my regrets. Again, that's the article that Go Collect found
Well,
me
you
on.
say
So
it
it
was a
all
regret, but
connects.
in a way, those comics have helped you maintain your lifestyle and help.
They served their purpose.
You
They
can't complain about that. That's
no. And one of the best things is that I didn't have to sell the Spider-Man collection
no,
because again, that's the thing that I'm passionate about.
yeah.
So, one day I will get the ASM one and I'll get the
You'll
AF-15.
definitely get it, mate. There's no
My
doubt about it.
my problem is now, even though the ASM one will complete the collection, I'm more likely to buy the AF-15 first because I don't like the cover of ASM one. I think
Well,
it's one
you're
of the
not.
worst covers
Okay,
that they've done.
interesting. Um, I actually quite like the cover. I know a lot of people don't like that cover. I actually do like it. It's a Ditko, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, don't get me. I love Ditko as an artist, and
I
they're
like.
some of my favorite
I like
some of my
Fantastic
favorite
Four.
covers.
I actually prefer Fantastic. I Fantastic Four is in my personal collection.
Mm.
Spider-Man is one of the ones I decided was not in my personal collection. Now, I've got a load of Spider-Man.
So one of my little gripes, and I know a good friend of mine feels the same, is that they didn't believe enough in early Spider-Man that they kept linking him to the Fantastic Four. And
Yeah.
so in those early issues, every issue or so, the Fantastic Four would show up, whether it was just Johnny Storm or the whole gang. And it's like they didn't believe in the character enough. Now, looking back in hindsight, we can go, well, that's ridiculous. He was a hit from page one, and it's like, well, I don't think he was. It took, they didn't have that confidence, and so they kept attaching him
Well, of
to the
course, the
Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four was the bit was the what started the Marvel role on the superhero stuff.
Yeah,
So they were the number one act.
yeah.
So if you'd got a new comic and you wanted to support it, you put the Fantastic Four in there.
Well, this goes back again to
Like later on, if you introduced a new one, you put Spider-Man on the cover
yeah,
because he was the seller.
yeah. So this goes back to what I was saying about if I took my investor's hat off, I believe that Fantastic Four is the most important Marvel book. And I believe that The Incredible Hulk is the best investment Marvel book. However, despite me saying that Spider-Man Amazing Fantasy 15 is not a rare book, that's the one I still want because that's where my passion is.
Yeah,
And
well,
it drives me mad that even though I know these facts and I know which one I should go for, I can't fight that inner passion. I can't fight that thing that says, no, you got to buy the Air 15. Yeah, even if someone had them all laid out in front of me and they said they're all the same price, all the same grade, I know that I should be picking one over the other. Like, I know that the other two are probably better books to have. But I think, like with a lot of us, a lot of people love Spider-Man.
yeah, they do now. I mean, I sell now, so I will actually. So when I'm buying comics, I will buy either for my PC or I know I'm buying to sell. So
Mm,
and I will always buy if I get a good offer on Spider-Man, I'll always buy it because I know it'll sell.
yeah. See,
Spider-Man,
so that since giving up all those books during the pandemic and since completing my Spider-Man collection, that's it. All these boxes behind me, these are all Spider-Man.
yeah,
I have nothing else. Um, yeah, okay, I've got maybe like the Complete Secret Wars from like the old
yeah,
80s one and the
yeah, yeah,
2015.
yeah.
I've got things like the Age of Ultron run, House of M, but they're concise stories. Do you know what I mean? They're a limited run, as it were, not the full works. I've got rid of everything else. I don't have anything else. I made that choice to sell everything and just collect Spider-Man, and now Spider-Man's all I've got.
So have you got all the sort of spectaculars, the webs, the
So my article today went out this morning for Go Collect is my accidental collection, which is Web of Spider-Man. I over the time of purchasing Amazing Spider-Man comic books, I would buy job lots which
yeah,
had various Spider-Man books in them. And one day I just looked over at this massive pile that I had accumulated of miscellaneous Spider-Man books that weren't part of my collection, but they were there. And I started going through them and I noticed that I had a complete run of Web of Spider-Man, right? Including a load of duplicates. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've inadvertently I've completed another run. So now that's part of the collection.
yeah.
I have maybe half of Spectacular Spider-Man. And obviously in amongst that you've got Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man,
Spider-Man, yeah,
etc.
yeah,
I think the Sensational Spider-Man's in
yeah,
there as well.
yeah.
I've got a lot of them. But this includes things like the Edge of Spider-Verse stuff with the first appearance of
Oh,
Gwen Stacy
okay.
as Spider-Gwen. This includes some of the Miles Morales stuff, including his first appearance for the Ultimate series. I am a Spider-Man collector. I have pretty much all of it, and it's just knowing where it all fits in. I've opted to insert some of those event storybooks into the actual run of the collection. So
Oh,
when Spider-Man
yeah, yeah.
disappears for Secret Wars, bam, Secret Wars is in there,
Is in the
and then he
collection.
returns and he carries on. Same for Maximum Carnage, bam, it's in there. Same for Craven's Last Hunt. So Craven's Last Hunt, I actually went out of my way to buy two copies of the other books just so I could have a set in the Amazing Spider-Man run and have a set separately because
Okay.
it's
So
one of
you
my favorite
are
stories.
so I try to define different types of comic collectors. So I think there are four. So I define four categories. One is the collector. So which you are definitely a major. You're definitely in the collector category. And this is the guy who wants the full collect. This is I want to collect this, and they're just buying to collect. They're not collecting for value. They're not collecting for the cover art. They're not collecting particularly to read it. But
Oh, I do read mine.
well,
Just
I'll
just
just
to throw that out
yeah,
there, I
yeah, yeah,
do I do read.
yeah. And then so my next collector is the investor, which I'd say there's two types. There's the long-term investor who's buying, for the long term, and then there's the flipper. Now you have done a bit of the flipping, so
Yes.
and next third one is people who buy it for the art, and some people do. They just buy for the cover art.
Mm.
And then there's the reader, the person who's just buying to read.
So this is why I store and collect mine in that way because I don't want the story to be broken. If I
Uh,
want to read the next issue, I want it to be there.
yeah.
And so for me, that's really important.
So in
Um,
fact, so I just finished this. So I think those are the four categories, but I think each collector is a different percentage of those four categories. So what you've described, I would say you're 60, 70% a collector. you're probably 20% a reader, and you also got a 5% flipper to make the money to buy the others, you know. So I'm
That's fair.
about I'm about 35% collector. I am a collector, but I'm not quite as obsessive as you are about it. So, for instance, my first collection is Brave and the Bold, which I started collecting 40 years ago. I've still
Yes.
got five to get. So,
So not one of the things that I like to point out, and I hate it to come off as braggy, but one of the things is during this time of me collecting after Stan Lee's death and the pandemic and everything else, the fact that I completed this within 2.5 years, my proudest achievement is that I don't work. I'm a full-time stay-at-home dad and have been for 8 months prior to the pandemic. You know, my life never changed. When the pandemic happened, I was still at home. I was still doing all the things that I would do as a stay-at-home husband and a father of two. The fact that I was able to complete this collection without having a job and only making the hobby pay for itself through that act of flipping books that I had purchased, knowing that the MCU was going that way. I had the first appearance of Blade, the first appearance of Black Panther, first appearance of Ghost Rider. I had Werewolf by Night, Mephisto, every character that you can imagine, the Galactus trilogy. I bought all of these long before people were jumping on this bandwagon for the MCU. I picked them all up super early, knowing that I could flip them for the Spider-Man books that I wanted to keep. So, say what you want about if that makes me a bad person or
no, it
not a
doesn't
true
make you that
collector or
person.
anything else,
Actually,
but
makes you a
for
sensible
me,
person.
that's
Yeah,
how I did it, and I'm proud of that
yeah,
because
no, I
I
think
didn't I
that's
didn't spend the household money. If anything, the comics helped the household during the pandemic.
no, I think that's very impressive. Look, I think you did a really good job, and I think your timing was pretty good because if you bought
I
those
could never do it now.
pre-COVID, you know all that, the Fantastic Four trilogy, they doubled or trebled. You were doing that at the right time, so you hit the sweet spot there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so impressive, and that to a certain extent, that's what I've said now. So I did move a part of my pension pot out, and said I want to spend it on comics because I'd rather have my pension doing something I enjoyed rather than sitting in some fund somewhere.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I said, right, I now want, when I want to be able to fund my personal collection from selling the stuff that's not in my personal. So this year, my target is I'm only buying when I've sold to buy.
Yeah.
So the hobby's funding itself, a bit like you were doing. Um,
I've tried to explain to people as well, like more newbie collectors, as it were. And I'm quite a newbie collector, having only really gone
yeah,
full in from 2019. Um, but I've tried to explain to them that you can't do what I did because it's changed so much since then. The prices have soared and everything else. But again, this is again going back to the whole collector versus investor thing. I'm under no illusions that the bubble could burst or this could all just drop down in price. The difference is that I've decided to collect something that I know is desirable. So whether or not it is an investment, there will be someone out there who will have an interest for it. Whether I have to sell it broken up or if I am lucky enough to find someone that will go take it as a whole, which I don't think is going to happen. But when the time comes, I'm not claiming that these are going to be worth an absolute fortune because, like with the old penny dreadfuls from like the Victorian era, things can just disappear off radar and no one could care less. So we'll have to wait and see. But I believe, my son is 4 years old and he's watching new Spider-Man animated shows on TV.
yeah.
Spider-Man is still part of his life. Now
Spider-Man's okay for another.
he might not necessarily connect with comic books the same way that I do, because it's a different medium that he's been introduced to. Um, but I'd like the idea that he knows that they're here and that they are where it began and what it is worth. And I'm under no illusions either. I let my kids read these books. I've got videos on my YouTube account where my daughter is literally holding up my first 100 Spider-Man issues. Like I'm fine with that. You know, Comic books are meant to be read, toys are meant to be played with, and if I cared that much, they would be in a airtight vault somewhere, not just up here in the spare room. For me, it's about enjoying what they are. I only ever slab books. when I've worn them out enough that I think that they're in danger of falling to
Falling
pieces.
apart.
Yeah. So that's for me, that's the true that's the true side of maintaining and looking after them. I want to preserve them now that they've got to that stage where they are falling apart. So a lot of my CGC slabs are low to mid grade for that exact reason. I a little ranty time. I don't believe that 9.8s are gonna matter at all in the next 10 years, because no matter what 9.8 you have, there's going to be sun bleaching or there's going to be something else wrong with it, that even if you hold two 9.8s together, they're not created equal and people won't be paying that money for it. It will become very subjective again. And that's going to lead to a problem. I think these companies like CGC or CBCS will then have to offer an additional system where you resend that book back in and they look again, or whack a separate sticker or something else on it to prove. If not, I don't see how they're going to stay relevant. I really don't. And I don't get me wrong. If you want to slab your books, slab your books. I do it on occasion. I just think that if you're doing it for the grade, you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't.
I probably got about 3 or 4% of my collection is slabbed, and I have slabbed a few recently because CGC are turning around stuff in a month. So I'm taking advantage of that. I live near London, so I can take them into the CGC office
Yeah,
and pick them up, and it's 23 quid or 25 quid for and so for flipping, I will take comics in to get them graded because they'll sell more graded than they will not graded. But that's a flip, and not for my personal collection. On the other hand, I also grade up the same reason you do. I pick, if I pick up a really old Batman that's falling apart, which I have done, I will send that in to get it secured because as soon as you open it up, bits fall off it. So whereas if you put it in a slab, I don't care if it comes back a 0.5 or a 1.0. I've done it because I want to preserve it, because I know that if it wasn't in a slab, it's going to deteriorate even more. So I will do that. And also I will do it because, my kids will inherit these. It's going to be far easier for them to get a valuation and to be able to sell them if they want to sell them, if they're graded. So some of the more valuable ones I just get graded because it'll be easier for whoever inherits them to do it. So there are a number of reasons for getting grading. Flipping, I do it for flipping. I'll do it for preserve the comic, and I'll do it for inheritance purposes. So yeah. But generally I'm not really. I like to hold a comic. I like to be able to read it, and I like to be able to smell it.
the smell. It's all about the smell.
So, generally, if I've got something slabbed, I want another copy that I can hold and open up and, give it a smell. And so I quite like having a high grade copy that's there for the value, the long term value, but also a nice cheap reader copy. You can just
So this also goes back to something that I struggle with, because I don't have a problem with it and I would buy them, but equally part of me being a completionist does want the full thing. But it's coverless books. For me, a comic book is so much more than just its cover.
Yeah.
And so often, people, like you mentioned before, some people buy just for the art. The interior pages are art too, and there's some great splash pages and scenes and little panels and all sorts that I absolutely love. And to lock that all away in a slab, I can't get my head around. Another thing that really winds me up, I don't know why people have this mentality. I don't understand it, and I don't mean to offend anyone. I really don't. But you've got people who will turn down a book because it's missing the Marvel value stamp, but they'll accept the same size piece missing from the front cover and say, yeah, that's fine. I don't understand it. I would rather have the book looking nice and getting a green label or whatever it might be, because none of the Marvel stamp affects the story or does anything. It's inside the book. I'd rather that. I like the idea that a young kid was that excited to cut it out and do whatever with. Like for me, that's more special. Yeah, I struggle with a lot of this stuff. You
But
know,
it's different strokes for different folks, which is what I
yeah.
say. You know, people are buying for different reasons, and what turns them on, you know, what excites them is different. You know, there are these guys.
A coverless book still has the same story,
Yep.
the same uh timelessness of it, the same smells, like everything else is the same. It's just missing the cover. So yeah, I pick up some coverless books every now, especially when you get them for pennies. I love grabbing some coverless books just to. I would hate to think that they ended up anywhere else. I'm protecting them. Come home with me. It's like anyone who brings home stray cats, I bring home stray comics.
Yeah, I mean, I will pick up, you know, if definitely if it's a coverless comic and it's, you know, an old Silver Age one, yeah, definitely, because some of the modern comics, no. I mean, the
Yeah.
internal art in some of the modern comics is just awful. You know, so quite often the cover is the only thing that's worth anything. So it depends on the comic. Yeah, but definitely agree with you on that. The coverless comics, I think, is worth buying, and you've seen it already. People are selling single pages of, you know, Detective Comic 27, which, you know, if they've destroyed a full copy of Detective 27 to do that, I'm not happy. But you know,
Yeah, so this is where greed becomes a problem. So I've thought about this often as well. And it's like to know that somebody destroyed a book just to make money by selling individual pages, that doesn't sit right with me. But if you found a book down in like a basement or up in a loft and it had been eaten away by mold or maggots or anything like that, but there was one good page left and you slabbed that to preserve it and everything else, I'm all for it. Right. So this is why I have a problem with there was a company doing trading cards recently where they had cut up an AF-15 in
oh
order to have like an individual panel on a card. I don't. I would rather have the whole book. You know, if you were willing to, if there was only one good page, but you had the whole book, regardless of its condition, I would rather buy that whole thing from you. Like sell it to me as if it was one page. That's fine. I would rather have the whole book, but I do understand that if it was especially mold and stuff, you know, where you don't want it spreading to the rest of the pages, it's just when people get greedy. And the problem is that we don't know each individual page that is out there. We don't know the backstory behind it. Um, yeah, it's tricky.
yeah, it is. So, Luke, thank you very much for that. Thank you for your time. Um, I'm probably going to put this out as two videos because it's nearly an hour long, which is too long for my viewers.
Sorry for my ranting.
Really interesting chat. And we'll have to catch up and do another of these sometime because I think there's a lot of stuff that we haven't covered off, but we could chew the cud over. So again, thanks very much, Luke. That's your lot, guys. See you again soon.